Right, good morning, everybody. We're going to get this thing kind of kicked off here. People probably may filter in as we go. Anyway, we'll just give a quick basic summary, and then we'll go into our teaching. Outdoors folks, much like soldiers in combat who hope to survive, learning to adapt while negotiating over, through, and around obstacles that hinder direction of travel. Steep terrain, rivers, fires, natural disasters, things of that nature, as well as predators and your very own mind set under stress. The awareness that life without war of some kind is absolutely impossible in the natural as well as the supernatural realm. Continuing struggles affect everyone's life without exception. John 16:33. In this life you will know trouble. As well as Matthew 4:1-11. Even Jesus faced the trials and the troubles of this life. The longer we live in a fallen society with its inevitable obstacles, our awareness of our need of enough inner strength to fight and survive comes from the point man. And the point man happens to be God himself. Jesus is our point man. He's our GPS. I like to call it God's positioning system. We need that inner focus, guidance, and wisdom to overcome the task ahead of us. Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Isaiah 45:22. Look unto me. These excerpts are taken from Chuck Dean, 173rd Airborne Ranger Chaplain, Vietnam, 65 to 66. So now I'm going to introduce Pam and Kurt.
Okay. I'm Pam Stemke, the better half of Kurt. I had to throw that in there. What I'm going to talk about this morning has to do with food prepping. It's always a good idea to have some stores of food that you don't necessarily get into. You have it put somewhere where in the event that there's a disaster, a grid down situation, you've got food that you can rely on in the event of an emergency. Before I get into that, though, I would like to, if I can find it, I'm going to read a little from, oops, maybe, where'd it go? I'm going to read from Genesis 41, a little bit of the story of Joseph. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, it is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, behold, in my dream I was standing on the banks of the Nile. 7 cows, plump and attractive, came up out of the Nile and fed in the reed grass. 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and thin, such as I have never seen in all the land of Egypt. And the thin, ugly cows ate up the first 7 plump cows. But when they had eaten them, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were still as ugly as at the beginning. Then I awoke. I also saw in my dream 7 ears growing on one stalk, full and good. 7 ears withered, thin and blighted by the east wind, sprouted after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. And I told it to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are 1. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blighted by the east wind are also 7 years of famine. It is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. But after them there will arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine that will follow, for it will be very severe. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that the thing is fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it about. Now therefore let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years. And let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. That food shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine. Why I think this is so important is the Bible is telling us that we need to make sure that we store up food. It's a lot like having health insurance. It's a lot like your car insurance, your home insurance, that kind of thing. You may never use it, but you're still paying into it, correct? So the idea behind food prepping is making sure that even if we have a blizzard, a couple years ago when we had snow and a storm came along, we at our house were without power for about 32 hours. So there's a whole bunch of different things that come into play, one of them obviously being food. Making sure that you have enough food. Obviously, if you have no electricity, you're not going to get into your freezer and you're not going to get into your refrigerator, because if you do, then you've heated up the inside and now you run the risk of all of that spoiling. So hence the reason for having foods like this, canned goods that you can get into, a way to be able to cook those things also. Basically what I've done here, I've got a 5-gallon bucket, I've got 3 sizes of Mylar bags. The idea being that, a lot of people think all they have to do is put food in a bucket. That's not a great idea because it can still get moisture in there and ruin whatever it is you're trying to store up. So the Mylar bags come in real handy along with the oxygen absorbers, and the idea being that a 5-gallon Mylar bag, I can put beans in there, for example. And then I can put the appropriate size oxygen absorber in there, and then as I seal it up with my hot jaws that I have, I can squish the air out, make sure everything's in there, and then seal it up. And that oxygen absorber will also take whatever remaining oxygen's in there and it'll just absorb it. So now you've really, and then you put that in your bucket. And then with a soft rubber-headed mallet, you put the lid on, mark the date and the item that's in there. You can do that with beans, rice. I've done it with pasta, various types of pastas. You can do sugar. I did brown sugar. Now, brown sugar is kind of goofy because if you don't have the right situation, your brown sugar is going to get hard. I put it in a little Mylar bag. I did a test. I put it in there, I put the oxygen absorber in there, and I sealed it all up. I kept it in my pantry at home. I looked at it after 2 years, and it's still skishy. I can squish it, which means it's still good, it's still soft. So that's nice. Also, your canned foods, that's a great thing to do, but just remember you're going to have to rotate. It's going to have an expiration date. So if you in your pantry, the good thing to do if you buy cases of canned goods and stuff and you use this particular item a lot, just make sure that you rotate. and pay close attention to the expiration dates. Now, using a system like this, if you're doing dry goods like the beans, the rice, and that kind of thing, your expiration date is going to be almost nil because you've done what you need to preserve that food. I have also done salt, garlic salt. You want to have spices, herbs, that kind of thing, because just because we may be in a grid down situation or a collapse of some kind doesn't mean we have to eat bland food. So if we think ahead about what we want to store, then we can make the effort to store those very items the same way. I have taken the smaller bags. There's a 2-quart and a 1-gallon. You can put beans and rice in those. That way you have smaller, more manageable amounts. If you want to do that, just remember once that bucket is open in a 5-gallon Mylar bag, you're going to have to use that before you use anything else because you don't obviously want it to go bad. Also remember, you're not going to store stuff that you're not going to eat. If you don't eat a certain food item now, chances are you're not going to eat it when we're in a situation that we need it. So just be aware of that. I just recently was very privileged to be able to buy what's called a Harvest Right freeze dryer. I haven't received it yet, but I'm really excited because those freeze dryers are amazing. They come in 3 sizes, small, medium, large, and as opposed to dehydrating your food, which doesn't remove all the moisture, the freeze dryer does. And the way this thing works is I'll have 4 trays that I can put the food in that I want to do, and I can freeze dry ice cream sandwiches. I can freeze dry corn, any of that stuff. Some of you may have heard of a company called Thrive. They're kind of a business out of the home kind of one of those kind of deals. The problem with that is they're expensive. So in my mind, it makes more sense for me to spend the money on getting my own freeze dryer and doing my own thing according to their instructions. I think in my mind I'm going to save a whole lot more money, and we're going to make sure and have the items that we enjoy eating, but also the items that are going to be nutritious. Because with a freeze dryer you're maintaining about 90% of your nutrition, where with a dehydrator that's great in a short-term situation, but it's going to take out a lot of your nutrients. So just be aware of that. Rice is another good one that you can store away. White rice is better than brown rice, and that is because the brown rice, they've removed the hull, but they've left everything else. And so you've got a lot more fatty acids going on there that can cause spoilage. You can still store it, but I'm just saying probably your best bet over the two would be the white rice. It doesn't have as much nutritional value as the brown, but at least it'll give you a full belly, a lot of caloric count to give you the energy that you'll need to sustain yourself and your family. I've also got a can of butter. This is kind of cool. This is my gold. This is called red feather butter from New Zealand. And these guys, it's fresh creamery butter. It has no artificial ingredients in there of any kind. It's just the butter, and they've canned it. Part of the reason that they came up with this is they got people like in Australia, for example, who live in the outback. And they need things like this because there's no shelf life. Absolutely no shelf life. It has been said that that the cans have been opened after 20 years and that butter was still good. When you're out in the outback, of course, you don't have electricity and that kind of thing. So the canned butter has been a very good deal for people who not only live way out, but who go camping, hiking, and that kind of thing. You can buy it 1 can at a time, or in my case, I bought a case. I do plan on getting more. The only thing is you want to make sure you store that where your temperature stays fairly consistent. If you get 70 or above, it's probably not going to help that butter at all. So just be aware of that. That can be found on a website called PleasantHillGrain.com. That is a great site. They have a lot of kitchen tools, a lot of bread making, you know, those kinds of things. But they have, when you pull up the site, there's a little index. If you go over towards the right, you'll see preparedness. Click on that, they got all kinds of stuff. I have purchased 2 buckets of wheat berries. One is the red wheat, one is the white wheat. So they're a great site for that kind of thing. And they package all of their stuff with the Mylar and the buckets. So you don't have to do anything, just store it. The idea behind the wheat berries as opposed to flour is your flour, the nutritional value in that isn't the best. If you do the red and white wheat, that's great for making bread, for example. So you would obviously need to have a little grain mill to be able to process this and make your own flour. So those are all things that you can find on that site. And I bought I think it's the junior grain mill, and it's the hand, because if there's no electricity, I'm gonna have to crank that baby myself, and that's fine. But so they have all kinds, they've got beans, they've got legumes, they've got, these guys have everything, it's just great. Also sprouts is another thing. If you're into sprouting or you want to learn more about it, that's a good place to do that. Also, where I get the Mylar and the oxygen absorbers and the hot jaws is from a site called OptimumPreparedness.com. They're the ones that you're going to find all of this stuff. They are also the ones that I purchased the sprouts. So I got the seeds for various types of sprouts. I got the little 4-tray sprouting garden, whatever you call that. But anyway, so that's coming. So both of those sites are really my go-to sites for any of this kind of thing. So I highly recommend them. I've also got 3 books down here. Two of them I got online. One is Survival Doctor's Complete Handbook. The other one is the First Aid Manual. I think anybody should have a first aid manual in their home, an updated. Typically these come out, you know, they do editions. So every year they're going to update, because certain things in medicine, as we know with technology, is this another one, that certain procedures, they'll go, well, you know, this used to work, but this is even better. So you want to pay attention to the additions that you find in your manuals. I've also got this other one from Barnes & Noble called Prepper's Long-Term Survival. That is an awesome book. Don't get these books to use when the grid down or collapse happens or there's a disaster. Get them, read them, look through them, you know, mark them up, whatever you need to do so that you know. Also, if you can get into classes, especially with medicine and trauma types of things, you know, it's so important. But one of the things that I wanted to emphasize with regard to food prep is when you're prepping your food, you're prepping it for you and your family. You're not prepping it to hand out to people. And I know a lot of Christians have a concern with that, and it's a very valid concern. We are tasked with being able to help our fellow man. However, we need to understand one very important thing, and that is we need to look out for us and our families first. Okay? That's so, so, so important. The problem with having people coming and looking for handouts, obviously they didn't prepare. They didn't take it seriously. They believed, oh, this will never happen. You know, whatever the mentality is. And that's not to say that we don't want to help them. If we have extra stuff, we can do that. But in here, he talks about, he says, charity survival kits. So you can build charity survival kits. And in that, he suggests that you use a couple cans of canned food, a small folding can opener, 2 or 3 bottles of water, a handful of strike anywhere matches in a waterproof container, 1 or 2 emergency blankets, directions to the nearest emergency shelter if one has been set up in the area, and a pair of clean socks. Your clothes, obviously, and Kurt will probably get into this more, but socks are so important because the last thing you need in a situation like what we're talking about is to start getting kind of foot funguses and that kind of thing, especially if you're having to walk. So, but like I said, he'll get into that. So then you can put these items into a small backpack and cover it in a plastic garbage bag to keep it dry. Stash it under a bush at the outskirts of your perimeter, so the outskirts of your property, whatever perimeter you have set up. If you are approached by someone needing assistance and you feel compelled to lend a hand, direct them to the charity survival kit. Explain to them in no uncertain terms that this is the only help they are going to get from you, and should they approach you again, they'll not enjoy the experience. And I think we have to also understand that we have to be firm. We don't need to be mean or ugly or any of that kind of thing, but you know, people have to realize that it's sort of like a stray dog. You start feeding that dog because you feel sorry for him, he's going to keep coming back, right? Well, I think humans are pretty much the same way, especially if they're in a situation where they can't take care of themselves. So, you know, those are unfortunately the awful truth of this kind of a situation that we could find ourselves in. So just be aware of that. I don't think I really have anything else. The hot jaws over here, I got that from Optimum Preparedness. You can use an iron to seal your Mylar. You could probably also use like those hair straightener things. This I did simply because I have 2 temperature settings on that that are geared especially toward sealing the Mylar. So you don't have any guesswork like, well, I don't know if this is going to really work, but okay. It's worth the investment. And again, that's from Optimum Preparedness. I think they're out of Washington. Everything I've ever ordered from either of those 2 sites I've mentioned, I have received very quickly. And I think there was only one time when I ordered the wheat from Pleasant Hill Grain, their source, you know, something had happened, and so I had to wait an awful long time to receive that. But that's a special situation. That wasn't something that happens when you order their grains and stuff all the time. So it was an unfortunate thing, but I still would go to them. They're awesome. And I don't think I have anything. I think one of the things, I've got a couple other sites here. Deepsurvival.com is another one, although I would be a little careful about some of the things they talk about. But that's up to you. It's really common sense. Another one that I found called doomandbloom.net. These guys are amazing. I stumbled onto them just recently. They are a husband and wife team. He has been a doctor and surgeon for over 25 years. She is a nurse with a bunch of initials at the end of her name. But they put together this site because they believe that it's very important that people like you and me understand how to respond in a situation where injury, gunshot wounds, that kind of thing, trauma especially, is important. I've ordered their book called Survival Medicine. It's won several awards, and it also comes with 4 DVDs that'll just show you how to do things. I watched a video on how to suture up a pig's foot, and they use pig's feet because the skin is so much like ours. It's a little thicker, but it's like, wow, I have a fairly good idea now of how to do something like that if that was needed. And again, these are things, and John will talk more about this, but these are so important that we understand that, yes, having a first aid kit, prepping for food, having a bug out bag, our firearms and that kind of thing is going to be very important for all of us. And we need to take it seriously, and we need to understand. One thing I want to mention, women in general, typically, we can be a victim very easily because of our gender. And I'm reading a novel right now, and it's written by a woman in a grid-down collapse situation, and it's really interesting getting her perspective, because most of those kind of books, and even these kind of books, are written by men. So you're getting their perspective. Well, women, we need our perspective. We need to understand what's important to us, you know, and what we can do to build our self-confidence, what we can do to empower ourselves in a situation like this, okay? So those are things for you guys to think about. There's all kinds of stuff out there online that you can look up, and I wish I had, you know, something. The book that I'm reading is A Great State. Let me see if I can find it, because it's a great place to start. It's called A Great State, The Divide, and it's actually going to be a trilogy. So the next one is A Great State, Aftermath. But it's all about her. She's a single mom with a teenage son, and how she is going to have to deal as a woman, protecting herself and her son and all these kinds of things. So again, it's a great perspective to get from a woman. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to talk with you after we're all done with everything. That way we can keep the momentum that I built.
There you go.
So, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kurt Stemke. I'm the other half of Pam. We are a great team, you know, and that's, as couples, you really want that. You want to have a good team. We complement each other in certain areas, and, you know, what I don't know, she knows, but we work very well together. I'm here to introduce you to Bob. And Bob is good. Just so you understand, those are acronyms. Bob is referred to as a bug out bag. Good is get out of Dodge. It can be called several different things with regard to that. You know, a go bag, a 72-hour bag. Those are things that you want to take into consideration. But first, in Matthew 24, just as a reference, Jesus is talking about the end times, and the disciples are asking him. In Matthew 24, verse 17, he says, "Whoever is on the housetop must not go down to get things out of there. Whoever is in the field must not return back to get his cloak." That means just get up and go. In the event of an emergency, you have to kind of think about those things. We've talked about grid down, society meltdown, those types of things. But the benefit of having a go bag, a Bob bag, a good bag are the things that you need to think about. When you think about what happened in California last month, Paradise, a lot of those people only had minutes to get out of the house. When you think about what do I need to take, what do I grab and go? Well, if you're already set up with the equipment you need to survive for the minimum of 72 hours, and I have a non-exhaustive list up here. It's a good basis to start on, so if you're interested, help yourself. But the idea behind the Bob bag is to get you to a location where you can take care of yourself for a minimum amount of time. The things to consider in setting up a Bob bag are things like a pack. The ideal for individuals, if you have to go on foot, is a pack. It's recommended that you get something that will contain all of the items you need. Something with pockets, externally or internally, is ideal, because if you get what's called just the tunnel, or you throw everything into a bag, then you end up rummaging through to find the things that you need. If you have the smaller items in the pouches, It makes it a whole lot easier to retrieve. In thinking about it this way, there is the rule of threes. A human being has 3 minutes of life without air. You can go 3 days without water. You can go 3 weeks without food, and that's based on an average. So, obviously, if you're without air, it doesn't do you any good to have a bob. But then if you have water, you have something to retain that water. Canteen, small metal bottle, Camelback, or a water bladder. Those are things that are good to retain. If you need to get fresh water source, you would invest in something like a life straw, Katadyn, water filter. Those things are real important so that you can actually survive. Food. You want to think about 3 days worth of food. Provide yourself 72 hours of sustainability. If you want to pack canned goods, that's great. But think about the weight you're going to be putting in that bag. We have gone to the freeze-dried foods. You can get MREs. Those things are great. You get those with a high caloric content. You need the calories to sustain yourself. If you're going in a vehicle, that's great. If you don't have the ability to go in a vehicle, you're going to be hoofing it. Again, go back to something with a pack. They make several different styles of packs. Recommendation is getting something that has a belly band as well as the shoulder straps. The idea behind that is so that you're carrying the weight on your waist and not on your shoulders. And if any of you have ever done any packing, that really does wear you down. I've done it both ways. When I was a whole lot younger, I did it without the belly band, and I'll tell you what, it was miserable. The belly band, I've done almost 1,000 miles of backpacking and such with a pack that had a belly band. The idea behind the pack, there's several different options. You can go an external frame, internal frame. Internal frames can get really, I think the idea behind them is great. If you do an external frame, the advantage of an external frame is that when you're walking and carrying a pack, you get that airflow. You're going to get that airflow in the back, and it's going to help keep you from overheating. The internal frames are more fitted, and they'll form to the contour of your body, so you are getting that airflow. The advantages of an internal frame is they're a little bit lighter than an external frame. If you need to pack something other than your goods in your pack, you can take that pack off of the frame, such as if you're out someplace and you need to pack an animal, you can strap it to that frame and carry that animal out to where you need to go. Again, it's a personal choice. You can go as far as going into a store and specifically set up for backpacking and talk to them about a pack. You don't want to get a great big huge pack. You don't want something that's too small. The differences. But when you go into a pack store, you tell them, hey, I'm looking for something that, I'm 3 to 5 days of backpacking. That's going to give you the volume you need to carry the items that you need. I purchased an Army surplus Alice pack. Very inexpensive. The military used them for many, many years. They've converted to the Molly pack. The Mollies are a little more compact as far as the size. You still get the same volume. They are more of an internal frame as opposed to the external frame. Mollies run a little bit more money. You can set up a good bob from scratch for about $350. A lot of the items contained in the bob are things you already have at home, so you're not going to be spending a whole lot of money. Good idea is to watch for sales. We picked up a few things. Coleman had a parking lot sale in Bend, and we walked in, we probably spent $50 when we were there, 50, 60 bucks. And the most expensive item was a sleeping bag. The rest of it, $5 to $10 for camp stove, mess kit, eating utensils. Those are things that you have to consider. So I'm going to kind of go back to my list here. The most important things you want are food, water, and warmth. Okay? Again, food, you can get real expensive on those things. Freeze-dried food. Costco had a great deal on the freeze-dried packs not too long ago. We picked up a case of freeze-dried food for about $50. I think it was $49, $50. That was 24 meals. So if you think about it, 50 bucks, 24, $2 a meal, you know. That's not very bad, considering it's freeze-dried, which can be rather expensive. Again, look for the deals out there. You want something that's got a high caloric content in it, that's going to give you what you need for the energy. Snacks, trail bars, trail mix, those types of things. You want to put those in your bag, because that's going to help sustain you while you're going. Water purification tablets, water bottles, you know, those are things that are very important. One of the things that I've recently discovered was that the recommendation for a bob, which I don't have in mine, is a metal water container. It only needs to be 12 to 16 ounces, but that's enough for you to carry. Because you think about the weight of water when you're walking. If you have to walk, if you're going to carry what you need to survive for 72 hours, you're talking 15 to 20 pounds. Don't want to do that. So again, getting water purification is what's important. Personal hygiene. You get someplace and you think about it, even if you have to evacuate to a different location, and you've got to stay there for a few days, you want the things that are such as soap, toothbrush, toothpaste, lotion. Those are things to take into consideration. Depending on the time of year, clothing items, additional clothing items are important. It's a good idea to have a warm jacket, a light jacket, extra socks, extra underwear. Those things, and it's recommended. Do it like you normally do. Change your clothes every day. If you get your feet wet, it's nice to put on a nice dry pair of socks. One of the things that people don't think about, and I thought I had it in there, but it may be in Pam's back. We didn't bring both of our bags, but there's a primary bag in couples, a primary bag and a secondary bag. And the thing to think about with those is that the primary bag is going to carry the most weight. Guys, you're going to be the pack mule in the event that you have to walk. Women will carry what they need along with supplementals. Pam carries the water filter that we use, which weighs maybe 6 ounces. You know, think about those things. A lot of them you have several hundred gallons, the small ones are several hundred gallons of filtration used. You can get them up to 5,000 gallons. It just depends on what you want to take with you, what you need. Again, I go back to, in the event you have to get out of your home, you want to have what you need in your bag. You need tools. An axe, knives, a multi-tool, inexpensive items. I do have the list up here. I also have some really good references if you would like to have those. Self-defense. If you're not comfortable carrying a firearm, so be it. But think about self-defense. You want to protect what you have. Because people get nasty. I mean, when they get desperate, they're going to try and go after what you have. So, some may want to carry a handgun. Some may want to carry a rifle. Some may want to carry both. Try to keep it concealed, less obvious, those types of things. Again, going back to your pack. You don't want to get something that's all flashy. You don't want it out there for people to see. Something plain, simple. Most people would look at that and go, oh, he's got food, maybe some food, some clothing, that type of thing. But again, all those things are here that's going to help me survive for 72 hours. I'm going to take care of myself and my wife for 72 hours. She carries the food that she needs, I carry the food that I need. Those are important. If you have to have your prescription drugs, first aid kit's important. Prescription drugs, again, that's one of those things, if you have 5 minutes to get out of the house, go grab your bottles out of because you don't keep them stored in there. Throw them in your bag. Get out of the house. Maps of where the areas you're in, compasses, GPS, those are things that will help you get to where you need to go. First aid kit. Again, I have what's called a Israeli battle first aid kit. It has the basics of what you would need to survive. In the event of an emergency, that'll help you get through it. Sanity. You want to keep it entertained. If you sit down, deck of cards, your Bible, a journal, a book to entertain you. Those are things that are important. You want to keep your sanity when you're out on the road. I think most importantly is having a location where you're going to bug out to. If you have a fire or an emergency, where do you need to go? Where can you go? Think about whether or not the location you're going to be going to is going to be safe for you to go to. Always have a primary, secondary, those types of things. It'll help you understand what you need to do to survive. Most of us carry our credit cards, debit cards, driver's licenses in our wallets. That's important. For other papers such as a passport, titles, things, having copies in a sealed paper bag or plastic bag in your bag will help you out in the long run. Important thing to think about is money. Now, not everybody can do it, but having a minimum of $500 in your go bag it'll help you down the road in the long run. You have a credit card. If you get to some place and they still take credit cards, you can check into a motel or something, and that'll help take care of you. I go back to the emergency situation, fire situation. We keep hearing about the Cascadia fault and the potential of a major earthquake. It's not supposed to disrupt us so much over here, but on the other side of the mountains. But again, you think about there will be a disruption in things such as groceries until they get a different coordination going. Because most of our stuff comes out of the valley, we're stuck, Grocery stores run out. Until they can get something coming from the east or out of California, we're stuck. So again, going back to food preparation and storage, if you have that, that's great. It doesn't take much. And I'll go back to what Pam said. A 50-pound bag of beans, 50-pound bag of rice, $25 or less. And you can eat on that stuff for quite a while, adding the seasonings and stuff. Those are important. I have a couple of books here. I've read this one quite extensively, James Wesley Rawls, and he's the founder of survivalblog.com. This gives you an overall view of what you would need to do, bug out bags, stay at home, what kinds of things you would do to prepare yourself, sanitation, food storage, how to protect your home, those types of things. This is a new book, and this is Build a Perfect Bug Out Bag. He's done several books. His name is Creek Stewart. At the front of his book, he talks about, can you hear the sirens? Your electricity's out, your home phone has no dial tone. When you try to use your cell phone, you get the same message over and over. All circuits are busy. You know a disaster is quickly approaching, and you know that waiting this out is not an option. In the breathtaking stillness, you can hear the clock on the wall, tick-tock, tick-tock. The 11th hour is here. You have to leave your home immediately, and you and your family, or you and your family will die. Like it or not, disasters happen, and they do not discriminate. It does not matter what you look like, where you live, what you drive, or how much money you have. No one is exempt from the threat of disaster. Disasters strike suddenly and give little, if any, warning. There are a few moments in one's life when every second and every action count. It is in these critical moments that nothing else matters except life itself. In the few moments you have just before a disaster strikes, your preparedness level will define the rest of your life. Disaster preparedness is no longer a mentality reserved for the subculture of survivalists. This awareness is quickly becoming a mainstream phenomenon as people from all walks of life begin to embrace the reality of the following statement. If not, it's not if a disaster will strike, but when. So it's important to remember, what are you going to do when it happens, not if it happens? We need to rely on ourselves. It's also great to have a great network of friends who can work together. If you need to survive, everybody can get together. Don't be afraid to talk to friends, neighbors, family. Those are things that are important. The building a bug out bag requires 3 main areas of preparation: information, knowledge, and hands-on practice. Get to know your equipment. That's real important. Know what you have, know how to use it. Doesn't do you any good to have a tent if you don't know how to set it up. Doesn't do you any good to have a stove if you don't know how to use it. Lightweight backpack stove, canister of fuel, that should last a week or more for the purposes I have. In here he has some great resources listed, websites where you can pick up items, water, canteens, water purification. They're just great things. If you want to look at it, you're welcome. Barnes & Noble carries this. You can order it through Amazon. Again, it's a great resource because it covers a lot of things, not just the bug out bag, but the contents of the bug out bag and how to prepare it. You know, I do appreciate the gentleman who put this together. His name is Creek Stewart. And in his acknowledgments, he says one thing: I am a sinner, saved by grace, and would like to thank my Father for its continued blessings and mercies. Sorry. Which I do not deserve. So folks, this is a great starting place. Again, I have a list of items. It's not exhaustive. It's a great reference. Things you put in your bag don't necessarily mean, okay, I'll rephrase this. Build your bag to yourself. This is a guideline. The lists are a guideline for you, helps you to understand. Not everybody is going to need everything that's in the bag or on the list. It is recommended that every 6 months you go through your bag, revisit things. Make sure that your snacks don't have an expiration date on them. Think about the seasonal changes. Recommendation: go through your pack in the spring and the fall. That way you're geared towards winter and summer. Most of everything else here is I think basically it's just having common sense and knowing what you're capable of doing. Being able to rely on yourself, because in the long run you want to be self-sustaining. You don't want to have to rely on somebody else. And that's all I have.
First of all, good morning, everybody, and thanks for coming out. I'm John Parsons. I'm with Northwest Self-Defense. We're a private organization that teach firearms and tactical medicine skills throughout the state of Oregon. Real quick, I wanted to jump on what Kurt said before I get started. You know, when we talk about gear and not, having to invest a ton of money, we're kind of blessed here living in Central Oregon because there's a lot of people with a lot of money in Bend that don't know what to do with it, and they buy stuff. Then they sell it to used gear stores. I picked up a Sweetwater filtration system, one of the pump ones, for like $14 at Gear Fix. All I had to do was replace the hoses. I mean, go hit those used gear stores because you can find packs and stoves and stuff like that that have been used maybe once or twice, and you're not paying brand new. So just something to think about. To get started real quick, one of the things when we think about survival and first aid is, and we start talking about self-reliance, it's really easy to become just that, relying on ourselves. But one of the things, remember, coming out of 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 5. Let me find it here. Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think of anything as being from ourselves, but our sufficiency is from God. So everything we have, we're blessed to live in a place where we can, talk about this stuff and do this stuff and be able to go out and learn these skills, and God's the one that's blessed us with those opportunities. With that said, we're also responsible to do everything we can to survive and take care of ourselves. So when we get started, we're going to cover real quick some common cold weather injuries they can experience in the wintertime. I'm not a medical professional. I've got some experience with this. I've got some experience with real-world trauma. But if you want more information and really learn these skills from a professional, go seek that out. If you are interested in having a class over here, I've got access to people who, with certifications of real-world medical experience, that can come over and teach classes. So this is going to be a quick overview, and we'll cover a couple quick things on trauma and kits, and then we'll move on from there. So go ahead, Chad. Okay, so cold weather injuries prevention. I'm John Parsons. Go to the next one. Prevention of cold weather injuries is everybody's responsibility. You cannot, when you're out doing stuff, even if you're out doing stuff around your house this time of year, things like frostbite and can really sneak up on you. So you've got to be aware of yourself and kind of what you're doing. Okay, susceptibility factors of cold weather injuries. We're going to talk about a description of a few of them, how to identify them, how to treat them, and how to prevent them. So here's factors that can cause them. A previous cold weather injury, just like a hot weather injury, once you've had one, your body is more susceptible to having another one. So once your finger, if anybody's had frostbite, once you get frostbite, your fingers become very sensitive to that in the future. Inadequate nutrition. Again, food, no matter what the situation, being properly nourished is vitally important. Alcohol or nicotine use, both those things will sap nutrients from your body and will actually cause your body to be more susceptible to injuries. Dehydration, again, water's life. You know, you go a long time without food, you can only go a couple days without water. Overactivity, underactivity. Your body is made as a machine. It's made to work and move. If you're doing too much and you overexert yourself, you're going to get hurt. If you don't do anything, your body's going to be not doing anything when it's time to be put in use. Long exposure to the cold. Even when you have to be outside a situation, find shelter. And there's always ways to find shelter no matter where you're at. Being sick, obviously. Geographic origin and ethnicity. You know, one of the things that we don't think about, and I learned it really fast when I was in Afghanistan. You know, I thought I'd lived out here in Oregon my whole life. I've spent time in Utah and Colorado in the mountains. I did not know winter until I went to Afghanistan and was working at 9,000 feet. And those guys wear very little clothing and just move in it like it's nothing, because that's what they've been in. Their bodies are conditioned for that. Wind, rain, and cold. Especially wind will drop your body temperature very, very fast if you're not protected. And being wet, and especially being cold, is the fastest way to die of hypothermia there is. Age. Unfortunately, I'm going to say the real young and the older you get, you know, you're more susceptible to these type of injuries. Discipline. I pulled these off of military slides I had, but just understanding that you have to be very resourceful of your energy, and you don't want to spend it goofing off or doing so, especially if you're out with children. You know, children like to play and they like to do things, but when you're looking at long term, you know, you got to be smart about how you spend your time. And then again, training and physical stamina, those go together. You know, we always talk about being in shape, and I'm the worst when it comes to just going and working out, but there's things you can do to help stay in shape but still be productive and trained. I mean, you know, hiking out in the woods is a great example, snowshoeing in the wintertime. You know, just spending range time training or doing chores around the house. Those things will help keep your stamina up and help keep you in shape, and they're also productive instead of just going to a gym. And then poor clothing. I got kind of cut off, but having the proper clothes for the environment you're in are vitally important. Good. Okay, so body temperature regulation. This is how our body holds heat or releases heat. For heat production, your metabolism, when you burn calories, that helps maintain your body temperature. Exercise is good because the better shape you're in, the more efficient your body works. And then shivering. Shivering is something that your body will naturally do when it's cold, and what it does is by shivering, it's trying to create that activity to get your body going to create heat inside. And then for heat loss, convection. So when our body will radiate heat. If we don't hold that in, it's going to escape and we lose it. Conduction, same thing. If we wear clothes that our body that will allow the heat to escape, then we won't, again, we lose that. We have to keep producing more. The more body heat our body has to produce to stay warm, the more calories we burn, the more nutrition becomes a factor. And then evaporation and respiration. Again, this goes back into physical shape. You know, the heavier you breathe, more in the air that comes out, and the heavier you breathe, the more calories you burn, and the harder your body has to work to be able to maintain a body temperature. Go ahead and just bounce through these real quick. Okay, types of cold weather injuries. Hypothermia, frostbite, non-freezing cold injuries like chilblains, which is kind of the beginnings of frostbite, immersion or trench foot, and then other exposure injuries like dehydration, sunburn, snow blindness, and one that is very near my heart is carbon monoxide poisoning. Okay, so these are all medical emergencies and can all be life-threatening. If the body temperature below 95 degrees, that's basically becomes life-threatening hypothermia, and medical attention must be sought. There's no, once your body gets that low in temperature, there's no coming back unless you get into a hospital and start to be treated. Cold weather injuries can be severe. Conditions like wind, wet, clothing getting wet, those all, and inactivity all contribute to that in a multiplying factor. The wetter you are, the faster you'll get cold. The more inactive you are, the faster you'll get cold. So just keep that in mind. When we get tired, you want to rest. It's great. And more people that freeze to death do it because they fell asleep. That's the leading cause when people die of exposure, it's because they fell asleep. And then they basically, the body stops, body kind of starts to slow down, and you're not producing heat. Okay, hypothermia. Hypothermia is basically a condition where your body temperature drops below a certain temperature. Initial symptoms: shivering, dizzy, or drowsiness, withdrawn behavior. When people are cold like that, they want to be left alone. That's just our body's natural way of saying, leave me alone, I'll take care of myself. But when you get in that cycle of hypothermia, you're not thinking properly, and you can't take care of yourself. Confusion, slurred speech, vision issues, and stumbling. Again, all those things. And I've seen it before where it almost looks like a person's intoxicated when hypothermia starts to get real bad, because your motor skills start to go down, and your ability in your brain, all your blood and everything goes to those vital organs, and so your high functioning things start to deteriorate. And so it's one of those things. If you know somebody doesn't drink, they start to act kind of goofy out in the wintertime, there's probably a good chance there's something else going on. And then, when it gets real bad, if a person's shivering and all of a sudden they stop and they feel okay, that's not good. They haven't gotten warm. Their body's just basically not telling them they're too cold anymore. Desire to fall asleep, again, go back to that exposure thing. When you fall asleep, that's the most dangerous thing you can do, is falling asleep without a shelter or ability to maintain body heat. Heartbeat and breathing go down. That's, basically you're starting to slip into that unconsciousness, which ultimately can lead to death if you don't seek medical attention. So treatment, get out of the exposure. If you're in a place to where you can get out of it or go into a shelter, that's the best way to do it. Get in a shelter, find a heat source, get yourself body warmed back up. Again, evacuate. Like if you're out, hunting or spending time outside and someone starts to show those signs, get them to a doctor, get them to a hospital. Getting rid of wet clothing. That is, wet clothes will, especially like, I'm a huge fan of wool because it's comfortable. Good wool is comfortable and it keeps you warm, but as soon as that gets wet, it's done. Wool is horrible for that. Rewarming with body-to-body contact or in a warm sleeping bag. So one of the things I've seen and I've heard people talk about is like, just put your hands near a fire. Well, if you're starting to get hypothermia and you start getting that much heat, it can actually cause damage. That skin-to-skin contact or the body being able to create its own heat, in a sleeping bag or enclosed environment, that's the best way, so that the way body warms up slowly and doesn't go into shock. Where if you put somebody in, like near a fire and they start to get really warm really fast, that can actually cause more problems. Just like, I don't know if anybody has ever done it, but like if, when it's really hot outside, you jump into that really, really cold body of water, how it takes your breath away. Same type of thing. Your body cannot go in from one extreme to the other very quickly. It's got to gradually go up. And then, warm liquids, and then if needed, if somebody starts to become unconscious, CPR. Again, ways to prevent it. Layers. This time of year, I wear these base layers almost every day if I'm going to be outside. They're nice, lightweight. They don't feel too bad. They're inexpensive. You can get them at Costco for, I think, like $6 or $7 a pair. And that way, if I get hot, I can take it off, and then, I've just got a T-shirt on. If you wear one big heavy jacket with nothing underneath it, and then you start to warm up, you take that off, all of a sudden, you're going to get cold. So, when you're outside, layers, layers, layers. And extras, like they talked about with socks. Anytime I do any type of hiking, I carry at least one extra pair of socks. If I'm going to be gone, for several miles, I carry two. Because you never know what's going to happen. You step in water, even with waterproof boots, water gets in. Extra socks are vital, keeping stuff warm and dry. Again, proper nutrition, staying hydrated, and getting rest. You'll see those three things you'll see routinely through here, because those are probably three of the most important things you can do to help prevent any type of injury. Okay, so this goes into hypothermic symptoms. It's kind of hard to see. I tried to blow it up a little bit, but and if someone wants to look at it, I can print these off and show them to you. But it shows body temperature and what the symptoms are. Again, I can give you guys a closer look at this, or even give you guys my PowerPoint slide. You guys can take a look at that. It's some really good information. So frostbite. Frostbite is basically skin exposure to the cold. Your stuff, in severe frostbite, the tissue of your limbs and your hands actually will start to freeze. So any air temperature below 32 degrees, and it says skin freezes at 28. So again, that's that window of, where your skin will get cold and you're not quite to frostbite, but once, you get there, once that skin starts to freeze, medical attention is required. Superficial frostbite, just surface freezing of the skin. I don't know if you guys all seen it. I think I've got a picture on the next slide. Yeah, this is pretty severe, but you can see, your hands, when you start to get frostbite, your skin will start to get kind of shiny and red and purpley. Those are pretty severe, where actually the tissue underneath the skin has started to freeze, and something that bad could cause amputation. Again, redness in light skin or grayish in dark skin, a tingling or kind of a numbness sensation when you shouldn't have one, and then your feet feel cold, stiff, joints don't want to move because everything's just kind of starting to freeze up. Treatment: remove clothing, remove from cold, and prevent further heat loss. Jewelry. I don't wear, when I'm out doing stuff, I don't wear any type of jewelry. My wife doesn't either. She takes all her rings off, like when we go out hiking in the winter, especially in the wintertime, or if we're out doing yard work, because if you do start to get that and stuff starts to swell up, and then now you're worrying about cutting off something. Rewarm the affected areas evenly with body heat. Again, what you don't want to do is any of you guys ever had like cold hands and put them under water and how that hurts? Well, that's kind of, if you take frostbitten hands, put them near a fire, that can actually do more damage, and it really is painful. Don't rewarm frostbite injuries if it could refreeze. So if you're someplace like you're out camping and you build a fire, you got a little bit of frostbite, and you're going to spend another night, another day, put gloves on, try to protect it. But, when you warm that up again and then go back out and expose it, you're just compounding potential problems. Do not massage. And this is something that's changed. Years ago, they used to say, for frostbite thing, to massage those parts, rub your hands together. And that actually, again, especially when you start getting more severe, because it will actually start tearing pieces of skin and flesh, which can cause permanent damage. Don't rub snow on it. I don't know where that came from, but it's kind of like, you cut yourself, rub dirt in it. And then when it gets severe enough, especially when you're out on your own, evacuate for medical treatment. It's better to be cautious than to wait too long and have something serious happen. Again, back to prevention: layers, dry socks, protect yourself from the wind. There's some really good materials out that are lightweight jackets you can put over your clothing that are windproof. Wind will sap your body heat and create exposure issues very fast. And again, back to hot fluids: eat, drink often, stay active. Insulate yourself from the ground. So if you're laying and you're going outside overnight in the wintertime, I prefer a sleeping pad. They're lightweight, they're easy to carry. If you can't have that, cut some tree branches, anything so you're not right on that ground, because the ground will draw your body heat away from you. And again, buddy system, don't go out alone. That's a good rule of thumb for anything you do, but especially in the wintertime, because things can go bad very, very fast. Again, warm with body heat, avoid skin contact with super cooled metals, and then seek medical aid for all suspected cases. Any quick questions about that? Okay, like I said, I'm running through this stuff pretty fast just because I want to give you guys some exposure and some ideas. If you do want further medical training, I do have lists of resources and some access to people. They got a lot more knowledge than I do. So this is a chilblains is a non-freezing cold injury, and this is what we usually see, like when you're out doing stuff and your hands start to kind of red and they start to kind of feel funny. That's chilblains. It's not super serious, but it can become serious, especially on sensitive things like your ears and your nose. It can become a very serious issue. So basically, more often in wetter conditions, again, because that moisture will start to sap the heat out of those exposed areas. Can develop quickly, and again affects ears, nose, cheeks, fingers, and toes. Symptoms, you can see, I mean, I've seen that on my own hands. I don't know how many of you guys see that kind of red, shiny. Again, that's chilblains, which can also lead to frostbite very quickly. It worsens, it becomes achy, a prickly sensation, and numbness. Can eventually lead to blistering if it's not taken care of. Treatment, again, prevent exposure, get it clean, dry gently, rewarm, again, using body heat. Do not rubber massage. If you do get blistering, sterile dressings, and then again, seek first aid. And prevention, like I said, it's pretty all going to be the same things just over and over. Keep warm and dry, keep covered, and use the buddy system, and then wear proper clothing. I tried to take all the military stuff out of this, but I missed a few things. Immersion or trench foot. This is something you hear about a lot, but especially back in the past, but with new technology with socks, and then it's not as common. There's a partially non-freezing injury that happens from prolonged exposure to skin or moisture, or your skin to moisture. This is usually kind of even more of a warm weather injury, especially down south where it's really hot and humid all the time. But it can happen because especially if we're walking a lot, our feet sweat, and even the best socks don't absorb all the moisture away. So when your feet get wet, they can start, if you don't take care of them, they can really start to go bad. High risk during wet weather and in wet areas when sweat accumulates in boots or gloves. And where it says gloves, this can also kind of happen if you're wearing gloves like for hours on end. It can happen with your hands too. You can get the same type of thing. Symptoms. Appears wet or soggy, white, shriveled skin. I'm sure we've all seen that at some point on ourselves. Sensations on pins and needles or tingling or numbness and pain. And as we get more severe, skin becomes discolored like red or bluish. Those are pretty severe cases. It can become swollen and a waxy appearance, and then possibly blisters or open sores with weeping or bleeding. And in extreme cases, after prolonged exposure, it can actually kill off the flesh. That was, like I said, the reason why it's called trench foot is World War I, when they were in Europe, battling in trenches, that they would get wet and they didn't take care of their feet because no one really knew. And so that became a very common injury that pulled a lot of people out. Service. So again, at treatment, prevent exposure, dry carefully, do not break blisters, apply lotions or massage. The only way to do that is slowly warm with body heat, keep clean, and then eventually, over time, keeping off your feet, letting them dry out on their own and let your body naturally heal itself. So, prevention steps are the same. Keep feet dry, change socks, and apply foot powder if needed. Extra boots if you're going to be out for multiple days. Blousing bands, which again is a military thing. And then report, again, I forgot to pull those, report cases of leadership. Dehydration. A lot of people don't think about dehydration in the wintertime because we always think in the summertime, it's hot, we're sweating. But your body burns more calories in the wintertime than it does in the summertime. And your body works harder, again, to maintain that body temperature. So you can actually have more susceptible dehydration in the winter than you can be in the summertime if you're not careful, because when it's cold, we don't always think about drinking fluids. Again, excessive loss of water from the body may increase risk of hypothermia due to impaired ability to generate body heat. Quick symptoms, dark colored urine, headaches, dizziness, weakness, dry mouth, lack of appetite, and as you get more severe, stomach cramps. Irritability is pretty common, and then Mental sluggishness is another big one. Again, going back to, if you got somebody that doesn't use substances, and all of a sudden they start acting like they're just not thinking properly, there's something wrong. And that's usually a clear sign that some sort of medical attention is needed. Treatment. There's drink water. That's the only cure is to hydrate. And, other things like Gatorades and stuff are great because they've got, electrolytes and minerals, but there's no better way to help the body than just pure water. Don't eat snow. Your body metabolizing that snow into the liquid it needs will actually burn more calories than it'll do of any help. And then get rest. So if you're out doing any type of activities, and when I say inactive, that's just kind of common everyday activities. 3 quarts of water a day. If you're going to be really active, 5 to 6 quarts. And that goes back to what Kurt said about, that's a lot of water. So think about carrying, a gallon and a half of water on you, 6 quarts. Having that filtration system to where you can, I carry a 1 quart canteen and then a filtration system to where I can just find a water source, fill it up when I need it. And then don't wait till you're thirsty to drink water. Constantly drink, just a little bit all the time is better than trying to drink it all at once. And then if it's cold outside, hot liquids are great. I've heard people say that, well, hot liquids will dehydrate. Liquids are liquids. The only thing that's really going to keep you from hydrating is things like caffeine and stuff like that. Energy drinks or coffee are not recommended for hydrating. Sunburn. Again, we don't think about sunburn as being a cold weather injury, but any of you guys that have spent much time on a nice sunny day on the snow, and the way that reflects, it can happen really fast. So, basically it's overexposure of the skin to sunlight. Contributing factors, again, being light-skinned. We go back to that, cultural thing, certain culture or certain groups of people are more susceptible to sunburn than others. So just kind of know, how you react out in the sun in the summertime, and then take proper measures when you're out in the wintertime. Symptoms: redness of skin, prolonged exposure can become second-degree burns, pain, blistering. Again, same symptoms, just different time of year. Go into treatment. Again, skin creams like aloe, things like that. Aspirin for pain in severe cases, medical attention. I did see a guy got so sunburned when I was stationed in Hawaii, he actually was hospitalized. And then he got in trouble for letting himself get that way. It was funny. Yep. So, go ahead. Carbon monoxide poisoning. We're going to talk about this. I'm going to tell a real quick story. In 1999, I was up at Fort Lewis, and we were doing training in the wintertime. And we had these tents with these stoves in them, right? Really nice diesel converter stoves. And we had some guys, we're getting up in the morning, and this one tent, there just was not very much activity. And so finally I go kick open the door, and what they did is they put the stove on and they sealed the tent up. Every single one of those guys, they lived, but they all had to be hospitalized from carbon monoxide poisoning. It's odorless, you're not gonna know it's there. If you're gonna, if you get stranded someplace and you're in your car and you're gonna have your car running, crack a window so you got ventilation, because those fumes will seep into the car even if everything's closed up. If you're in an RV, you notice RVs are always vented pretty well. Leave those vents and allow that air to, because you've got to get oxygen, because carbon monoxide will deplete all the oxygen in a place very, very quickly. Symptoms, headache, dizziness, weakness, yawning, ringing in the ears, confusion. And it goes back to that, when the body starts to feel like it's got to fight something else, the first thing that goes, those regular motor skills, logical thought, hands and stuff. Your hands don't want to work as well. And then, as you get more extreme, bright red lips, eyelids will get really red because, again, your body will pull the oxygen in the blood away from those areas to go to your heart, your lungs, and your brain. And so the first things that you start to see are your extremities and then, tissues that aren't vital to survival. And then unconsciousness and possibly death. Again, move to fresh air. seek medical aid, and then if necessary, CPR, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Prevention, proper ventilation is the biggest one. I mean, more so than any of these, you can check your equipment, you can, make sure everything is maintained, but if you're going to use some sort of heat source that burns fuel, you got to have ventilation. Go ahead to the next one, Chad. Okay, another one that's near and dear to my heart because I've experienced this is snow blindness. I had an incident, I was a teenager, where I was the dumb guy that didn't wear goggles up skiing, and I ended up in the hospital because I couldn't see. So it's an inflammation of the eyes from ultraviolet rays of the sun. And basically, when the sun hits that snow, it's like putting it on a giant mirror. And it will just reflect it, and it'll become more intense. And if your eyes are exposed, it'll go sideways really, really fast. Symptom is gritty feeling in your eyes, redness or tearing when because your eyeball will actually start to swell, so when it moves, like you try to look laterally, it'll actually hurt. And then a headache. So I've experienced all those things. Again, it was a young kid, didn't know, but I now wear, anytime I'm outside in the wintertime, I've always got glasses on. And getting glasses that have, like interchangeable lenses, because different brightnesses outside, can really change. I've got, 4 sets of lenses for my glasses depending on what it looks like outside, from really dark to kind of a yellowish. So like when it's not even overcast, I've experienced it where, again, the UV rays, we can't see those, but they're still coming through the clouds, and that's what really affects your eyes, not necessarily the brightness, but it's those UV rays hitting the exposed eyes. Again, treatment, remove from sunlight. If it's real bad, blindfold or cover with wet bandages. Seek medical attention. And going back to prevention, eye protection, UV protective glasses. Most modern glasses have coatings on them to protect from UV light nowadays. But make sure that if you are going to wear something out, especially in the snow, that you have glasses that are properly coated to protect your eyes from that. And then, there are ways to make improvised things to cover most of your eyes, cardboard or something over your face, like a mask, with just little slits that just enough you can see out of, reduces that exposure. And don't wait for discomfort to begin before you take care of it. Be proactive. So again, back to, the key things, and I reiterated over and over, dress properly, drink fluids, eat right, stay in shape. Those are probably the biggest ones. Maintain a positive attitude, minimize exposures are great, but if you can do the top 4 things, most things that we do, unless you're a long-term, like several days, several weeks outside, you'll be fine in most situations. Anybody have any questions? Okay, so Kurt's been so gracious to volunteer. We're going to cover some few first aid things real quick. He did. The biggest one I want to cover is tourniquets, just because there's a lot of misinformation still going out. It used to be the prevailing theory was if you put a tourniquet on a limb, you're going to lose it. Well, a decade plus of war has shown that these things will stay on a limb for over 12 hours without any permanent damage to the limb. And these things are one of the first things you can do, especially for bleeding injuries, to stop bleeding, and they do work. So we're going to demonstrate it really quick here on Kurt.
Yeah.
No.
On his neck.
I've been told that neck tourniquets are bad. Okay, we are going to put it on his leg, though, and I'll tell you guys why. So really, real quick, when you get a tourniquet, and this is called a cat tourniquet. There's several different styles. This is the one I recommend just because it's easy to use. It's been proven to be effective, and it's been proven, again, not to do damage. And the way this works is it has a ribbon. You guys can kind of hard to see, but the ribbon goes from here all the way through and is sewn in. And so when you put it on the limb and you start to twist it with this windlass, it'll suck that ribbon up and create the restriction of the blood. If you'll notice 2 buckles, you've got an inside buckle and an outside buckle. I always prep my tourniquets by putting it through the inside buckle, so if I have to put it on really fast, it can work. It's always preferred if you can use both buckles to do that. So I'll demonstrate how we'll do that. All the time on tourniquets, whether it's on your legs or your arms, the term that you want to think about is high and tight. As high up into the joint as you can, as tight up against the body. So we're going to put this way up in her side. I'm going to get a little personal here. Okay? And then, again, whenever possible, if you can put it in that second buckle, you can pull it tight. And then the windlass, you just twist, and when it starts working, he'll know.
It's gonna hurt.
Down goes Fraser.
Yeah, if it doesn't hurt, it's not tight enough.
Yeah, if it doesn't hurt, it's not.
This is one I use for training.
I can start to feel it.
It's one I use quite a bit, so it's kind of wore out.
You got a sharp knife so you can get it off?
So we're gonna.
You guys should come down here where everybody can see better.
Well, what we're gonna do is, because Kurt's gonna actually demonstrate, I'm gonna talk about the first aid kits and stuff, so he's actually gonna walk in front since we got the corded mic with the tourniquet on. So,
And then when he can't walk.
You got a sharp knife so you can get it off?
I mean, I'm slow,
Free, right here.
I'm slow and fat, and I had to run 100 yards in full kit with one of those on. So, okay,
I can imagine.
hey Kurt, you wanna grab your trauma kit real quick? So, one of the things, so I usually have stuff here, but my son's elk hunting, and he decided to take all of my first aid stuff with him. But these trauma kits, you can buy them pre-packaged, and they're pretty good for having the basic things you need for a trauma situation. We're talking, severe cuts, gunshots, anything like that. And they're not heavy, they're not large, and they're not super expensive. Double Tap up in Bend, I'll give them a real quick plug, is they've got a really good selection of both pre-made kits like this and then individual items, which we'll go into just for a second. So you want to show them, do you have a tourniquet in there? So, yeah. So there's a couple styles of tourniquets. That's a TK tourniquet. Those are good. Like I said, I like the cat tourniquet because it's what I have experience. There's also what they call a rat tourniquet, which are those. Those are nice because they're nice, lightweight. They take a little bit more training to be able to use effectively. But those, literally will fit. I know guys that lace them through their belts and basically have them tied to their belts so they're always got them on. They fit in a pocket. A good trauma kit will just about fit in the cargo pocket of a pair of cargo pants. They're not a lot of stuff. The next thing we're going to talk about is, you got an Israeli bandage in there? Should be right there in the back. And I'm not going to make him open these, but these are the Israelis who have a lot of experience with medical trauma, create these bandages, and they've got a sterile gauze with a bungee type elastic strapping. And so what's nice about them is they've also got these little wings, so as you're wrapping that around the wound, it'll tie into those, so you don't have to, you can do it with one hand. I've seen these self-applied with one hand pretty simply, and so that's always my recommendation. There's other bandages out there that work great. Sterile gauze and tape works great, but these for an individual to do self-care are excellent. We're not going to cover the NPG.
That's okay.
And then the other thing is clotting agents. There's several different things. I think you have quick clot or gauze. I was going to have you hand those around if you have.
Do you want this one?
Not quite yet. She's going to hand out.
Don't open it.
It's called combat gauze, and what that has is that's kind of been treated with a clotting agent, and it's sterile, so it can actually go inside a wound. That's what a term they called wound packing. And so basically, you shove that inside a wound, and then it swells up, absorbing the blood, causing the blood to clot to stop bleeding. They also make this stuff in a powder form, where you can actually put it on an open wound. I can tell you by experience of watching somebody scream, it can be painful because of the chemical reaction, and that's why they've gone away from the powdered quick clot to the gauzes. And then some other things to think about in a first aid kit.
One thing I've heard is if you use any of the clotting agents, once you apply it, wrap it inside the bandage.
Yes. If you're going to put any type of clotting agent in gauze, bandage goes over that. It stays in.
I mean, put the package in there so that when they get to the hospital.
Yeah. So
and
medical
surgery goes
professional.
in to
Yeah.
do more
Usually.
permanent repairs, they see that there's something in there.
Yeah. Well, if they see gauze, they're going to know it's there, because all the combat gauze now have a tag in them, so when it goes into X-ray, it shows up. Anything made after, I want to say like 2009, all has a tag in it for X-rays for that reason. And then the other thing is relaying information. So if someone gets hurt and you call an ambulance, tell them, okay, this is what I did. I put gauze in the wound, I wrapped it with a bandage, or I put a tourniquet. And that way they can transfer that to the medical professional. But that is a good idea to put the package there. And then, some other thing is a pair of shears. Again, you can go to a surplus store, I think the one in Bend still has a bunch, and buy trauma shears really cheap. And those things will cut through clothing fast. They'll cut just about anything. I've got probably 10 pair at home that we use all over the house. And then, what's that, another pair?
Well, I've got,
Oh, you got small little scissors
these are actually,
for suturing. They force it. Okay. Yeah.
it's a sutures.
So that's a suture kit, as she was talking about, is, to be able to sew up, wounds. That's, if we're talking long-term, 72-hour thing where you're going to be out, or, grid collapses, getting that more advanced medical training to where you can, stitch up wounds, is the difference, literally the difference between life and death. But some other things in the kit, Neosporin or any type of antibacterial, especially for if you're up hiking, because a cut, the smallest nick over time, if it gets infected, can turn into a very serious life and death medical issue very, very quickly. Again, when I was over in Afghanistan, I saw an Afghan soldier get a cut on his hand, which wasn't bad. I mean, it was one of the things, but they just put a Band-Aid on, they didn't put anything, and within 3 days, his hand was swollen up about this big around because it got infected, and where if they would have put Neosporin on it, it would have prevented most of that. And then, again, and the other thing too is practice. You want to come take your tourniquet off?
Actually, I think it's gone numb, because it doesn't hurt to walk anymore.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say about especially the cat tourniquets is they are a one-time use. So if you are going to get one and you're going to practice, buy a couple for your kit and one to practice. You can practice with them over and over, but they start to lose their effectiveness because that ribbon will start to stretch over time, and that windlass starts to become kind of weak. They do make ones with the metal windlass. I don't recommend those because you can get really, really tight on those. So go ahead and take this off.
Yeah, right?
Oh, yeah. Feel the blood going back to my foot.
And John, can I just say something about a tourniquet? It would really behoove us, those that are interested in wanting to learn some of the trauma medical procedures and that kind of thing, because there is a time to use a tourniquet and there is not a time to use a tourniquet. And you have to know when and what that situation looks like. And so to have, your guys come in and give us that training, I think would be very, very, very important and valuable. So just because you've got a tourniquet and some guy's got a cut doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to be a tourniquet required procedure. So.
Yeah, and that's the thing is all the equipment in the world is great, whether we're talking about bug-out bags or firearms or medical stuff. But the body is trained to do what what it's trained to do. And so if you train to do nothing in an emergency situation, that's exactly what you're going to do. And I can't implore enough, whether it's getting training with myself or with Matthew or with anybody, go out and find somebody who you trust enough. They don't have to be professional. Somebody you just trust enough to give you good information and making sure it's good information, and get out and train and practice. That is vital. I spend a lot of time on the range because I teach firearms. I'm starting to spend more and more time doing medical stuff. You can't train enough. So, does anybody else have any questions?
If you find somebody who thinks they know it all, stay away from them.
Yeah,
Continue to learn.
I could spend a half an hour up here talking about how to find an instructor. And the first thing you want to find from an instructor is somebody that continues learning. Because anybody thinks they've learned everything they need to learn. Because no matter what it is, I look at like packs, and in my 20-year military career, how much they changed. Because I was in that transition from Alice packs like that to the Molly packs to the Generation 2 Molly packs. And things continually change through experience. Same thing with medical. Like I said, 20 years ago, our first aid kit consisted of a little pouch with a bandage. Okay, now we get a kit almost like that. Because as people experience things, things change and things evolve constantly. So, well, thank you guys very, very much.
I am Matthew Bales. I am a professional hunting guide. So basically touching on all these things you see from just the different materials, how many things kind of overlap. Most of us that live in rural America that grew up hunting, fishing, things like that, you actually pick different pieces of these things, but just putting all this information together and just kind of seeing like things. But I'm looking at things from a hunting standpoint, hunting in the wilderness. Obviously around here where there's a road every quarter of a mile, if you get lost, chances are, I'm not sure what to tell you on that. You probably should stop hunting.
It should be out there.
Exactly, yeah, go hire a guide. Anyway, like I said, coming from a wilderness standpoint, I carry an internal pack, but I also have what's called a pack frame for hauling meat and things like that out, which is similar. You just remove the bag off of it. I keep a military laundry bag for hauling out elk quarters, things of that nature. Anyway, as I said, as far as the like inclement weather, obviously you're hunting in the wilderness where you don't have roads and things of that nature. You're dealing with any kind of thing that's going to hinder your travel, whether it be windfall, whether you're elk hunting, steep, rocky, tight terrain. Elk like to live in some of the worst stuff possible known to man. And if you're hunting with a client, you're going into the worst crap imaginable to man to extract him out of it. Anyway, to kind of touch on some of these same things, you see I've got a tripod set up. I generally run either a spotting scope or big binoculars. It's good not only for just spotting game, obviously, trying to pick up something that you're after, but in the event that you are caught out in that type of environment, that lets you save your legs. You can grid the terrain. You can spot green areas, things like that, springs, coming out of the mountains, things like that will draw you to, if you carry life straws, camelbacks, things of that nature, but it also lets you take in the terrain to where you can see your direction of travel of, okay, I need to get to that point, what's between here and there? Canyon, or can I catch a ridge and go around? It's all about how to circumvent obstacles, whether it be, in a it hits the fan situation or in the wilderness. Something is an obstacle in your way, and that lets you survey the ground in that manner to pick up the variances in terrains and things like that. Obviously firearms, that's something that I deal with, just like with John. We've also done the firearms training through Rimrock and Rawhide, barricade shooting. Obviously, John does more tactical because that is his business. We just offer it as something to get people started who want to get into protecting their homes, defensible spaces, things of that nature. Anyway, like I said, from a hunting standpoint, things like that, where you're going to be out in a wilderness area, you notice the piece of firewood up here, that's called a Swedish candle. You can either pre-make them with a chainsaw, hollow log type of setup, pitch stumps, this little sterno gel you can pack down inside those hollows, piece of pitch as a wick, fire it up. You can get out of size like that 8 to 10 hours of heat. You don't have a big campfire. Once again, you're looking in a predator situation, whether it be, bug out, that kind of thing, is you can heat, you can keep it compact, you can cook over top of it. Once it's burnt down, you can put a cast iron skillet right on top of them and cook, and it keeps it compact. And if you need to, you just tip it over if you're in that situation where, like I say, somebody's coming against your defensible space, you can put it out versus kicking firewood and smoke and everything else. It's out right now. Done. Just to kind of reiterate just the different things that you're looking at as far as your shelters. I carry emergency 2-man tent, just like the emergency blankets. It's a little tube. It's made out of the same material as an emergency blanket. They weigh just a couple of ounces, but it gives you quick, easy shelter. Obviously, GPS, we said God's positioning system. GPS is a good technological tool, but it is not a fail-safe, just like any other mechanical device. Learn to use a map and use a compass to move around areas of travel, whether it be a war zone or natural disaster, or said out in the wilderness. You got to know where you're at. That you can move from point A to point B. We said that, so it's one of those things that, like any mechanical device, most of it's right between your ears. Firearms, obviously, same thing. It falls right into bug out bags, preparedness, things like that. But what I carry in my pack, I try to keep it 60 pounds or less if I'm going to be packing it. I mean, it seems kind of heavy, but if you get caught out in the wilderness and you get a blizzard, you've got to have your fire sources, your heat bags, your gel bags. You can throw it over a pile of sagebrush and fire it up, and pretty soon you've got rip-roaring fire to where, matches and trying to find dry tinder and things like that. Well, pitch is everywhere. Everybody can cut a pitch stump and keep a little bit, stored aside. But going back to the firearms end of things, most of us, we hunt, you've got whatever the rifle holds, 4 to 5, if you've got one in the pipe. In a wilderness situation, you're going to carry extra ammo, just like you would in a bug out bag, for whatever you carry. If you're carrying a concealed pistol, if you're in the desert, in the area with snakes, obviously snake shot's good in a pistol, but you still have your rifle, obviously, for longer range to protect yourself, feed yourself, whatever you need to do. But the extra ammunition is always a good one. Headlamps, multiples. Batteries, LED, mostly LED stuff, low draw, but always carry extra batteries with those. Flashlights, obviously, different knives, knife sharpeners, things of that nature. A person wants to, a dull knife doesn't do anybody any good unless you can make a spear out of it. I'm a proponent of wool as well. I mean, I know I wear base layer stuff myself, the Under Armour. But what I like about wool over some of the really lightweight type of stuff that's out there, that everybody's really pushing the real high dollar stuff. Being in a professional hunting situation, I've seen more $400 pairs of pants. Oh, it's waterproof. Oh, you just rubbed up against that limb right there, guess what? Now you've got nothing. Wool's not gonna do that. I mean, you can always wring it out. I mean, it's lifelong. I mean, our forefathers and stuff wore buckskins and hides and things like that. Same type of thing. They didn't have that technology. It's nice to be able to travel around in. It's like wearing your pajamas. But it tears easy. I don't care if it's a $400 pair of pants, it's toast. It's absolutely no good once it's wet and worthless. Where the wool, like I said, it's going to last and last for whatever you're doing there. FRS radios with NOAA weather band type stuff. Obviously hunting in the high country. Surprisingly enough, a lot of these areas that we hunt, there's absolutely no cell phone capabilities in parts of eastern Oregon. But then there's those parts where you hit a mountaintop, boom, you got 5 bars. Once again, it's technology, and it can absolutely fail. But the FRS radios, same thing, the extra batteries, Weather Channel, you can update them with a chip, just like for mountain climbers, to where you have the weather, but you also have a beacon. You can hit it, and it will send out blips. That way, those with technology, whether helicopter, plane, pararescue, the fighter wing out of Klamath, as well as Portland, they use those for when they're pulling people off a Rainier or something like that because they decided to climb something they didn't have any business climbing in inclement weather. So you have that capability with those. They make GPS with that capability as well, where you can plug it in and have that rescue beacon if you are hunting by yourself, which once again, it comes back to pairs. The situation, obviously hunting with a client, I've always have somebody with me that obviously, the reason why they hire a guide is a lot of times is either A, they've gotten old enough, they don't want to deal with the general public again, or the simple fact you've got people that is, I'm new to it, and I need somebody to lead and guide and show me the way to do this. So that plays in my mind, they're not going to have the same kind of gear that I'm going to pack. So I've got to pack enough of that kind of stuff for 2, because chances are they're not going to be thinking about that. They're thinking, hey, I paid money, I'm killing deer, elk, antelope, whatever the case may be, I'm not packing all that stuff with me. I paid the money for you to pack it, so therefore I'm packing it. So anyway, I said just, as we wrap up, you can kind of look at the different things, see some of the similarities, in the types of stuff that we carry. Very similar. Obviously, I mean, your clothing, carry something bright colored with you, the little traffic type of things. I mean, I'm a proponent, I hate orange. I don't want to wear it out in the woods, but, when I was hunting in Quebec, you learn when you're out in a wilderness situation that, hey, that 400 square inches could mean the difference whether that chopper or that plane can see you and he's flying in inclement weather. That will show up to where, if you can't fire, that will show up. Same with the reflective blankets and tents. Also back to the spotting scope. In the right circumstances, obviously with sunshine, things like that, you're hurt, you're lost. All you have to do is rotate upwards. Unscrew the cap, that sun catches that reflection. Kind of like the old Batman with the shoot straight up in the air. Somebody, plane flying over, whatever, you see that glint or whatever, it's going to draw your attention to it, and that's where, your orange and other things like that actually really stand out and draw attention to yourself. And I think back to like predators, two-legged, four-legged. Kurt, I know, touched on it as well as John, that every man is 3 days from becoming a Neanderthal. as well as a dog becoming a coyote. They want what you got. So once again, it comes back to that protecting you and yours, and charity can come after that. You got to take care of your household first. And back to, I said once again, the predators, like with wasp and hornet spray, is actually a better bear deterrent than pepper spray or any of the commercial bear sprays that are out there. It shoots farther and is far nastier. If you want to go even further than that, you can go to one that is for dangerous spiders and things of that nature, as long as, you know, you don't want to be eating that stuff, your kid's glowing in the dark. But it's even worse than just the hornet and bee spray. Like I said, it's got a really effective range if you are against firearms, but yet you want some kind of defensible weapon. I mean, I don't normally carry bee spray and things like that around, you know, with me, but it's one of those things that, you know, it's just kind of been brought to my attention that, yeah, it's just another effective tool that, it's not, you're in Bend or whatever, we all know, you know, somebody wants to come out there and wash your windows, and I want some pavement, and they wrap a ball bat across your windshield. Well, I'm guessing a little bit of shot of hornet spray, down goes Fraser. So, and there's no harm, no foul there, I guess, as far as the logistics and the law, as far as like the firearms into thing, concealed carry, that the amount of litigation and stuff that comes behind all of that stuff is far more than people think. The rights and responsibilities of carrying a firearm and using it, not everybody's going to play Clint Eastwood. We know that. It's to avoid.
I just say, in Oregon, when it comes to non-lethal self-defense like pepper spray, Oregon is pretty generous on the side of the person defending themselves as far as protecting you from being prosecuted. Civil lawsuits are what they are, and anytime you are involved in any self-defense situation, it's something to really think about, is the fact that, you know, potential to be sued civilly, even if you're cleared criminally, is always there. But yeah, when it comes to non-lethal self-defense, tasers are still kind of a gray area. I'm hoping this year that the legislature will actually clear that up. There's some legislation to specify tasers as being non-lethal self-defense, so that would actually give us a real effective. But like he said, bear spray, pepper spray, bee and wasp spray, which is phenomenal for that, are all things that you can use and easily justify as being, you know, this person was threatening me. I didn't feel the point to where they were going to take my life, but I thought they could harm me, so I used a non-lethal self-defense.
Yeah, whether you lay the John Wayne boots to him afterwards, then it becomes a gray area again. I don't advocate that unless there's nobody watching. I'm just saying that up front, Jesus, forgive me. But once again, if you have evil inside you looking to do me harm, you know, I'm sorry, I guess when it comes to that, I guess that's where the flesh part of us, we still struggle with that part of it in our humanity, that, yeah, somebody hurts you or your family, yeah, you better pack their duds and grease their skids, because the meat house is going to get tore down. That's just a fact. You know, I don't care anybody. You could be the most ardent 60, 70-year pastor. Put him in that situation, find out what happens. He's going to protect what is most valuable, and that is human life. So, you know, to kind of, like I said, once again, touching on the different things with the spotting scopes, things like that. So many different uses of that. That particular one there, you can actually kick the legs out even further to where if you don't have one of the little tents, an emergency blanket wrapped around there, you can tuck back in that dude just like a little turkey blind or something like that. Anything that keeps that wind and weather off you, with a Swedish candle out in front of you, you can survive overnight. You know, I hate to think about the times, you know, going into a hole with an animal shot right at dark in the worst hole imaginable, slick, snowing, and you're spending the night, that's the reason why you're carrying the stuff that you carry. It's just that preparedness, you know, it doesn't go into that prepper type mindset, because any of this stuff can be taken to the far extreme of, I've got to have 5,000 rounds for everything I've got, and, you know, zombie apocalypse and all that. Well, somewhat funny, but yet, when I think of zombies, I think of, okay, I've got absolutely no skill sets. I live in the city, that grid goes down. These rural people have, for hundreds of thousands of years, know how to take care of themselves. They're gonna come like rats out of the city, looking to come for whatever it is you've got. And that's why I said, that's where that zombie mindset goes, you know, pretty much brainless. It's like, you know, I will just run myself, not think about counting the cost of trying to come against somebody when you're basically unarmed. It's a BB gun in a tank battle. It's just senseless, but it's very real, very real. Take a look at the thing, see if this thing's still burning out here.
It's still smoking.
Get a little bit of snow, type thing on it. Anyway, wind. Anyway, like I said, the Swedish candles, they're just kind of a really cool tool, and the fact that you can cook off of them. Is it along this size? You're looking at 8 to 10 hours, which is pretty crazy. And I see the nods, exactly, you're out in the woods, I'll fire up a brush pile. If we're doing drives or something like that, and there's a brush pile sitting there, there's snow on the ground, client's gonna be sitting there, you're making a push through, I use, everybody can make them, we got egg cartons, dryer lit, rendered out deer fat and pitch. Don't get any simpler than that, because if you hunt, you obviously got to take care of your meat unless you're sending it to the butcher. You can render it out, take a little bit of time, and you make your own fire starters, or you can buy the commercial varieties. These little gel packs. Find the biggest sagebrush you can find, stick that right on top of it and light it, and pretty soon you got yourself a good bonfire. So, good stuff. Obviously pitch. You know, pitch stuff's plenty of in this part of the world. It's free, or you can go over to Ace and buy a box of pitch for like 15, 16 bucks, or you can go find a power saw and use about 3 minutes. Or make the gas. Basically, I think what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of wrap up that way we can actually, I mean, I don't want to reiterate and cover so much stuff that these guys have done an absolute fantastic job of laying out there. The hunting into things, obviously, questions to go to a deeper level, the type of equipment, things like that. You know, not everybody wants to go prepared for bug out. They don't want to think about these things. But most of us hunt and fish in rural America. We do. We can cover more of those kind of things. You know, as far as like, you know, firearms, things like that, what somebody would pack versus what they wouldn't pack. Just little tidbit type of things. And kind of educate ourselves on the things that we may not be used to. Obviously, being in the professional end of things, you know, using just your standard firearms, they work, and will continue to work. But it's got to be where technology, just like everything else, becomes order of the day, and guys start paying high dollar to go and harvest animals. We have to up our game from what we've grown up learning and doing to range finders, to knowing exactly, not, okay, I see him out here off Finley Beat Road, and I know, just by experience, you know, I can judge range pretty good, but when you get up in canyon country, things like that, it's like, is he 425 or is he 5 1/4? That's where like your range finders, you hit him right now. I have a dial on my scope, as most of the other guides and clients. Some of them do, some of them don't. that I know as soon as I hit it, it's dialed into, it matches the hand loads exact to what I'm loading, measured through a chronograph. That way you get your feet, your feet per second, everything matches, and it's laser cut to match that exact load. I know anybody's watched the Outdoor Channel where they have to do the long range shooting. It's the same thing. But proficiency of use, once again, it comes back to the same thing. Just like, the reflection, I was thinking about that when John was talking about that, is in the book of Mark where it talks about you become what you behold. So you think about that in perspective, you tie those two things together. That rifle is absolutely of no use if I stick that in a 10-year-old's hands that's never picked it up before. No use whatsoever. But with repetition, it's like practicing anything, it just becomes second nature. Any of the equipment that you have, it's good to keep it maintained, obviously. Something that a lot of people don't think about, except for where it comes off of the bench, things like that. I'm also a professional gunsmith, so dealing on the bench with guns, something stuck in the barrel, I'm right there. Somebody trips and falls out in the brush, I'll just go on about my merry way, versus keeping a little piece of acrylic that you can stick in the chamber with it obviously unloaded, and see if there's an obstruction in the bore. Because if you've ever seen rifle barrels that look like a banana split or a shotgun, not very pretty. So it's good to find obstructions, because you may think you can always stay upright, but not in steep country and snow, and you're not going to do it. You're going down. So it's a good little tool to have. It costs you about 50 cents. So anyway, we're just going to kind of close it out. If anybody has questions for, any of the individuals looking at gear, kind of seeing, the similarities of things that we have, and kind of go from there.
I'm going to revisit something that Pam said briefly. We think of this as an insurance policy. You spend thousands of dollars a year on your homeowner's insurance, your vehicle insurance, life insurance, health insurance. More often than not, you don't ever use those things except for your health insurance. When you're looking at various items up here, you're investing, as in a bug out bag, you invest $300 to $500. That's a lifetime investment. That's a high end if you look at it. That's food preparation. Those things when you're storing foods and things. It's an insurance policy. If you never use it, you never use it, but you have it if you need it. And that's what the purpose of us sharing with you is for, is that we want to be able to help you to understand this isn't something you have to do, but it's something you should think about as far as it's an insurance policy. So.
Absolutely. Like I said, most of us actually, take part in the outdoors, hunting, fishing, things of that nature. A lot of this gear we already own. But do you have it policed in one spot? Probably not. Unless it's your business or your absolute, I guess that mindset of it is your business. You think about, you got to be your own first responder. It goes to, the firearms into things, bug out, or just protection of your family, just in general against, any type of, threat or natural disaster, things of that nature. And basically both parties, whether it be husband and wife, whatever the case may be, it's kind of like a scout sniper situation where the man behind the glass is his equal behind the rifle, and they can swap places. So if you're in that situation where, your wife or whatever, say you carry a concealed handgun, things like that as protection, but I also look at maybe the wife might actually want to learn that skill set because she may be your first responder if you go down. Because none of us know that in that situation, that if you go down and you're going to survive, she may be that chance for you to survive. You know, it's kind of that same thing, whether you're in the outdoors or you be right down the street and somebody flips a butt out and catches the woods on fire around here, because it's obviously can burn just as quick as any place I've ever known. So it's just different things to think about. I mean, nobody really wants to dwell upon these things because it can take you to a negative state of thought. But preparedness versus the prepper mentality, I think, are polar opposite, diametrically opposed, because one puts the sky is falling into things and runs around panicked versus one going, I've done made my peace, I've got the stuff that I need to do what I need to do until I do check out, is a, like I said, just totally different. So, anyway, I said, I thank those for coming today. I said, we still got time, so that way if there's any questions for anybody, let you guys look at gear, whatever you want to do, talk about reloading, things like that, which is a class will probably be happening this year, hopefully. We have a board up here that is kind of showed the list. And you can also follow us on Facebook, the things that we have done this past year as far as defensive shooting, barricade, pretty 2A heavy. I mean, obviously with the state of things in this country, I mean, most everybody in here is pretty 2A friendly, I'm hoping. As I say, if nobody's laughing and smirking, you know, and saying Hillary 2020, we're safe. So, anyway, so you can take a look at the list. I also have survey sheets that actually has pretty much the same thing with some open options for outdoors things that people may want to see, something you've never learned to do, whether it be, you know, like I said, tying flies, fly fishing, fly casting, just any of the different myriad of outdoor pursuits. I know just in networking with, you know, with the different professionals and even non-professionals, and I go into, you know, my guide contact, same thing. If there is somebody that can teach something that I may not be as proficient at or absolutely knows it inside and out, that's the person we want to be able to put in place. That way people can actually really start learning some new and different things. Anyway, with that, I'll shut my pie hole. And anyway, like I said, everybody just kind of cover some prayer here, and we'll interrupt and we'll go into questions. Father, we thank you for this day, Lord, just the day that you have made, just the opportunity, Lord, to make much of you, to magnify and glorify you. And Lord, we are undeserving of anything. We deserve everything that comes at us. But Lord, you said you would be our protection, Lord. But we just know the things that each through experience, Lord, and just the way you move, that there's no coincidence that people are willing to step forth and learn something different and new. And that is always a good thing, is to continue to educate yourself. And we thank you in Jesus' name.